Hi. I just have some side notes, as I did for the Poison Hill, that go along with the Nowhere Girls. Trying to put a context around some of the topics addressed in the novel, I ended up writing what I call five vignettes of American reproduction. So I'm going to do that here um, and maybe highlight a little bit of what I did. Um, So, historical notes, or five vignettes of American reproduction. The following assumes that you are white, heterosexual, and middle class. It's 1814. You're 16 years old. You're in love. Both parents approve, and your fiance is given some land by his father. You're 3 months pregnant when you get married. You eventually have 9 children. Six survive childhood. Your sister, at a similar age, also marries a local farmer. She dies giving birth to her second child. It's 1854. You're 16 years old. You're in love. The boy who gets you pregnant skips town when he hears the news. Your parents kick you out. You have the baby and support yourself by sex work, having no other option. Your child dies at age 2. You travel out west, eventually marry one of your clients, and live long enough to be considered a respectable member of the county. Your sister also gets pregnant out of wedlock. She sends away for a patent medicine guaranteed to cure female problems and induces a miscarriage. She never marries. It's 1894. You're 16 years old. You're in love. Shortly after you turn 18, you marry. A few years after your first child is born, your husband walks out. You never divorce him, retaining status as a respectable married woman. Your friends believe you're a widow. Your sister also falls in love with and gets pregnant by an unreliable man, but unlike you, she isn't married. To avoid the stigma of her being an unwed mother, you adopt her child. The true parentage remains a family secret, never spoken of. It's 1934. You're 16 years old. You're in love. You have sex with your boyfriend in the back seat of a car and get pregnant. He's unemployed, like most of the country. Your parents want you to finish school. You drop out instead and move to another city, keeping the child and pretending to be a widow, though no one is fooled. You have a good relationship with your child, but you receive no child support, and life is a struggle. Your sister also gets pregnant unmarried. She goes to a reputable doctor who performs illegal abortions on the side. The steep fee is paid for by her boyfriend's father. It's 1964. You're 16 years old. You're in love. You're engaged to be engaged. Your parents want you to finish school. His parents approve but think he should finish college first. No doctor will prescribe birth control to an unmarried girl. Condoms are not available in drugstores but are sold in vending machines in men's rooms in disreputable bars. You get pregnant. Both sets of parents think it's a disaster. You are sent to a home for unwed mothers. You're not sure what you want, but you're persuaded to give the baby up for adoption. You get married a few years later to a different man and have 2 children. 30 years later, you begin to look for your first child. Your sister also gets pregnant unmarried. She runs away from home and has the child. She eventually marries also. Her child plays happily with its cousins. 17 years later, her child looks for and finally meets its father, but the relationship remains distant. So, I am trying to show here that there's a a complicated history of American reproductive choices. There are many other versions that things could have been different. But basically, when girls married young, a premature pregnancy, was often solved by marriage. Girls who were abandoned or couldn't get married to the father of the child often ended up in sex work. Hidden adoption, which was kept as a family secret, was also common. As I mentioned before, adopting a stranger's child was somewhat rare because people were afraid of bad blood. If your father was a horse thief, you'd be a horse thief. And there was abortion, and it was quasi legal depending on where you lived. It often kind of operated as a woman's affair, which men weren't supposed to know anything about. As modern industrial society emerged, women married later, they got more education, and they became accustomed to having more control over their lives. Women in sex work and unmarried mothers were often given the opportunity to reform, but they were expected to keep their babies because the baby was kind of a badge of shame. And if they were lucky, maybe a man would marry them and overlook that. Abortion laws became stricter, although there were always loopholes for people who had money and connections. In the post World War II era, however, people began having babies, and that's the point that the market opened up. And girls who got pregnant unmarried were now being pressured to give them up, with the belief that they could go on with their lives afterwards as if nothing had happened. They could, kind of still be virgins and get married. This was actually an international phenomenon, not just the United States. It's sometimes the term baby scoop era is sometimes used in countries like Canada and Australia. Particularly non-white women were pressured into giving up their babies. They were sometimes declared unfit mothers so their children could be adopted. And in Canada and Australia, that was actually the government policy because they believed they could assimilate natives by having the children adopted into white families. That didn't happen as much in the United States, or it happened unevenly, partly because of the different views of liberty and civil rights in different countries. Which is not to say it didn't happen, it just wasn't official policy. So adoption is as old as human history. You go back to foundational myths like Moses, Oedipus, and the Greek myths, in which unwanted babies are adopted and grow up to be heroes sometimes. And let me just say that I don't believe that the bond between a parent and a child is dependent on biology. It's a bond that can grow between two people, you know. But an era in which babies were seen as a commodity like that, and the concern for morality that you couldn't be an unwed mother, essentially created a situation in which the girls in the 50s and 60s had to give up their babies. And that's what this the Nowhere Girls is about. It's about the girls trying to just survive that kind of disruption.